Hello, my name is Michael Donahue, and today I will be talking about Martin Luther King Jr. and how he influenced our country with debate and diplomacy. Martin Luther King Jr. was born January 15, 1929, at Atlanta, Georgia. Originally, Dr. King's name was Michael King Jr. His father, Michael King Sr., changed both their first and middle names to Martin Luther after the German Protestant leader. Faith, social issues, and education was encouraged at home. Martin proved to be an excellent student and excelled at an early age. In 1944, at only 15 years old, he followed in the footsteps of his father and maternal grandfather. Attending Morehouse College, during his sophomore year at Morehouse, Dr. King wrote a letter to the editor of the Atlanta Constitution addressing the ill treatment of Negroes and what they wanted and should be entitled to the basic rights and opportunities of American citizens. He graduated from Morehouse University in 1948 with a Bachelor of Art, Sociology. After graduating from Morehouse, he attended Crozer Theological Seminary. Attending Crozer, he wrote to the Crozer Seminary student paper, Maroon Tiger, expressing the value of education. We must remember that intelligence is not enough. Intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education. In conclusion, if we are not careful, our colleges will produce a group of close-minded, unscientific, illogical propagandists consumed with a moral act. Be careful, brethren. Be careful, teachers. This would not be the last time he addressed one's character. He graduated from Crozer Theological Seminary in 1951 with a Bachelor of Divinity degree. King then attended the Boston University, where he began his doctoral studies in systematic theology, a branch of theology concerned with summarizing the traditional doctrines of a religion such as Christianity. He received his Doctor of Philosophy in Systematic Theology in 1955. Dr. King's grandfather began the family's long tradition as pastors of the Ebenezer Church in Atlanta. Following in another family tradition, he was ordained to the Baptist ministry February 1948 at age 19. Dr. King was always interested in civil rights primarily due to his father's influences. He was also influenced by Gandhi's policy of nonviolence, which would be his approach throughout his social conflicts. He inspired other people too, such as First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, wife of President Franklin Roosevelt, Howard Thurman, an American author, philosopher, and civil rights leader, and Vernon Johns, an American minister, pioneer in the civil rights movement. Dr. King spoke out against civil rights and human rights to include segregation, voter registration, human rights, and injustices. On December 1, 1955, the public became aware of the civil rights movement when Rosa Parks, a department store clerk seamstress, refused to give up her seat on a public bus to a white man. Since this was a violation of Montgomery's racial segregation laws, Jim Crow laws, Ms. Parks was arrested. Her brave deed contributed to the Montgomery bus boycott and further peaceful demonstrations and protests. Dr. King debated with civic leaders and politicians to end segregation that included designated areas for colored people, water fountains, bathrooms, buses, restaurants, etc. From 1865 to 1964, color people were restricted from basic rights such as voting, holding jobs, getting an education, and many other opportunities. This was called segregation and were enforced by Jim Crow laws, state laws that legalized racial segregations. Any colored person that defied these laws could face severe punishment to include arrest, fines, jail time, and personal violence. The black community was tired of this treatment, but did not know what to do. Someone decided to stage a sit-in, a nonviolent civil disobedience, to persuade corrective actions by oppressors. On February 1, 1960, students staged the first sit-in at a lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina. Unfortunately, the sit-in and many other nationwide sit-ins did not produce the results desired to end segregation. However, it brought the issue of segregation to the nation's attention by televising the brutality and cry for justice that Dr. King and others had denounced. In Georgia, Dr. King participated in a sit-in with about 300 students who were all arrested. While the students were later released, Dr. King was detained in jail. Dr. King was on probation from driving with an out-of-state driver's license, and the Georgia officials were deciding if this violated Dr. King's probation conditions. Dr. King was very actively involved in the sit-ins and provided the encouraging words. The key significance of the student movement lies in the fact that from its inception, everywhere, it has combined direct action with nonviolence. This quality has given it the extraordinary power and discipline which every thinking person observes. Dr. King was arrested 20 times, and one of those arrests was in Birmingham, Alabama. He was arrested for protesting without a permit. When he asked for a permit to protest, the court denied the request, and Dr. King was ordered not to protest. While in Birmingham jail, Dr. King wrote his now famous letter explaining why he broke the law. "I am here because justice is here," he wrote. "I would agree with St. Augustine that an unjust law is no law at all." How did Dr. King impact America? He fought for equality and injustice. Starting with the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, he soon became one of the most prominent leaders of the civil rights movement, leading other boycotts and marches. On August 28, 1963, Dr. King organized and led the March for Jobs and Freedom in Washington, D.C., where he gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Later, he led the Selma to Montgomery marches during March 21st through 25th in 1965. His first-hand approach and involvement contributed to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Act of 1965. He wanted a world where all people would be judged by their character and not by the color of their skin, as he addressed in his famous speech, "I Have a Dream," that he delivered at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. During his time, Dr. King received 50 honorary degrees and named Man of the Year for Time magazine in 1963. On October 14, 1964, he received the Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent struggle for civil rights for the Afro-American population. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. was a great man, but unfortunately on April 4, 1968, he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. His sudden death was a great loss to his people and to the nation, but his legacy left us the thought and actions of equality through debate and diplomacy.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.